In the 1990s, if you flipped through any teen magazine, there was one face that seemed to be everywhere: Devon Sawa. He was Casper, the friendly ghost who turned human for one perfect kiss, becoming the romantic fantasy of millions. But just 5 years later, that same face reappeared to terrified audiences. He was Stan, the obsessive, unhinged, and dangerous fan in Eminem's music video. How did the most beloved heartthrob suddenly become a terrifying nightmare? Landing two iconic, completely contradictory roles by your early 20s is a miracle. But this isn't the cliché rise and fall story you're expecting. The real story is that he did it on purpose. He intentionally burned the crown he was given, left the Hollywood machine, and walked off into his own wilderness. He vanished completely and fought his own battles in silence for years. What happened during that time? And why would someone who had everything choose to throw it all away? His story begins in a place far removed from the glare of paparazzi: Vancouver, British Columbia. This is where Devon Edward Sawa was born on September 7, 1978. His upbringing was profoundly, almost stubbornly, normal. This normalcy would prove to be a crucial anchor he would rely on when the storms of fame threatened to pull him under. His father, Edward Sawa, was a refrigeration mechanic, a man who worked with his hands. His mother, Joyce, was a homemaker. He was the youngest of three, with an older brother and sister. His heritage was a mix, Polish from his father, and, as he's described his mother's side, a little bit of everything. It was a grounded, blue-collar Canadian life. His interests weren't fame or Hollywood. They were ice hockey, football, and skating. But in the 1980s and 90s, Vancouver had a secret identity. It was known in the industry as Hollywood North. Due to favorable tax incentives and its diverse locations, which could double for anywhere from Seattle to a remote forest to a suburban American town, it became a massive hub for American film and television production. Shows like 21 Jump Street, MacGyver, and later The X-Files were all shot there. This meant that for a local kid with a spark of talent, acting wasn't a pipe dream. It was a local industry. It was a viable after-school job. Sawa began doing school theater, and it was a teacher who encouraged him to pursue it. Like many young Canadian actors, he started dipping his toe into the local scene. His professional career didn't start with a dramatic film role or a Disney Channel show. It started with a toy. In 1992, at the age of 14, Sawa landed a gig as a spokesman for Kenner's starting lineup line of children's sports action figures. His most famous early spot was a ubiquitous commercial for a Nerf-like toy football. In it, a pre-famed Sawa, all teenage energy, runs around a house shouting "Nerf pass" with a grin. He was, quite literally, selling action figures to kids his own age, a strange and perfect foreshadowing of the pre-packaged image he would soon be sold as himself. From commercials, he moved to small guest spots on Canadian television shows like The Odyssey. But his break, the one that put him on Hollywood's radar, came in 1994. He was cast in Little Giants, a classic feel-good family sports comedy from Warner Brothers. He played Junior Floyd, the star Pee Wee football quarterback for the elite team, coached by the arrogant Kevin O'Shea, played by Ed O'Neill. In a classic underdog story, Junior is the first to defect and join the misfit team, the Giants, led by O'Neill's hapless brother Danny, Rick Moranis. It was a pivotal role. He wasn't just the cute kid, he was the charismatic, athletic, and instantly likable heart of the team. He was the perfect boy next door, the kid who was not only cool, but also had a conscience. The film was a modest success, but it did exactly what it needed to do. It put Devon Sawa's face on film posters and on casting directors' desks. The machine had found its new part, and it was about to plug him into the mainframe. In 1995, Universal Pictures and Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment were deep in production on Casper. This was not a small film. It was a massive $55 million budget gamble, an astronomical sum for the time. A high-concept adaptation of the classic Harvey Comics cartoon. It was a huge technical undertaking, blending cutting-edge, for the time, computer-generated imagery with live action. The film's stars were already massive. Bill Pullman was a reliable leading man, and Christina Ricci, fresh off her icon-making turn as Wednesday Addams in the Addams Family films, was arguably the biggest young actress in the world. The plot, as a generation now knows by heart, involves Ricci's character, Cat Harvey, moving into a haunted house and befriending the lonely ghost of a 12-year-old boy named Casper. For 90% of the film, Casper is a floating, translucent digital effect, voiced with a gentle, melancholy lilt by actor Malachi Pearson. This was crucial. The audience builds a deep emotional connection with a character they cannot see, a character who is pure voice and emotion. But the script, written by Sherry Stoner and Deanna Oliver, called for a powerful, cathartic climax. At the Halloween dance, Cat's angel mother grants Casper his wish. For one night, until the clock strikes 10, he can be human. The search was on for an actor who could fulfill the film's entire emotional promise in a single scene. This actor had to be more than just a boy. He had to be the idealized fantasy version of the ghost everyone had fallen in love with. He had to be worth the wait. They cast Devon Sawa. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most effective and explosive star-making entrances in modern film history. The doors of the ballroom open, the light streams in, and walking down the grand staircase is not a ghost, but a 17-year-old Devon Sawa. He has perhaps 5, maybe 6 minutes of screen time, but in that brief window, he crystallizes the entire emotional arc of the film. He's the idealized romantic fantasy made real. The music swells. He takes Cat's hand, they float to the dance floor, and he delivers the line that would launch 1,000 crushes. "Can I keep you?" The effect was instantaneous and seismic. Casper was a box office colossus, grossing over $287 million worldwide, and every single young person who saw it left the theater with one question. Who was that? Devon Sawa became a phenomenon overnight. He was no longer an actor. He was an idea. He was Casper. The teen magazine machine, which had perhaps noted him in Little Giants, kicked into overdrive. Here was their new god. He was angelic, he was romantic, he was safe, and he had just starred in one of the biggest family films of the decade. The factory floor went into 24-hour production. That same year, 1995, he appeared in Now and Then, another female-centric, nostalgia-drenched coming-of-age story. This film was a powerhouse of young female talent, starring Christina Ricci again, alongside Thora Birch, Gabby Hoffman, and Ashley Aston Moore, as the younger versions of Rosie O'Donnell, Melanie Griffith, Demi Moore, and Rita Wilson. Sawa played Scott Wormer, the town bully, and the object of the girls' budding, confused romantic interests. It was a slight and smart pivot. He wasn't the angelic ghost. He was the tough kid who gets into fights, the bad boy who the girls tie up in a borrowed set of clothes. This role only reinforced his status. He was the boy you had a crush on, the boy you were scared of, the boy you wanted to fix. He was versatile, and the camera loved him. His fame was irrevocably cemented in 1997 with Wild America. This film was a teen idol trifecta, a marketing masterstroke. It co-starred Devon Sawa with Jonathan Taylor Thomas, the undisputed king of Tiger Beat. The film, based on the true story of the wildlife-obsessed Stouffer brothers, was a perfect vehicle for their images. They were adventurous, rugged, and got to wrestle alligators. The poster itself was a collage of 90s heartthrob perfection. The 90s heartthrob factory was running at full capacity. Devon Sawa was its star product. His face was on every magazine. His pinups were on every wall. He was, by all accounts, a polite, professional, grounded Canadian kid who was watching his life explode into something unrecognizable. But inside the factory, the product was starting to feel trapped. Sawa was smart, smarter than the machine gave him credit for. He knew that the heartthrob label was a gilded cage, and the lifespan of its occupants was brutally short. You either grow out of it, or the audience grows out of you. He could see the wall coming. And at the absolute peak of his teen idol fame, he made a conscious decision. He was going to break the machine before it broke him. The 1990s were a graveyard of these careers, a cautionary tale that Sawa was watching in real time. Look at his contemporaries, the very faces he shared magazine covers with. Jonathan Taylor Thomas, arguably the biggest of them all, a cultural force who received 10,000 fan letters a week, famously walked away at the height of his fame. He chose academia over adulation, attend Harvard, and disappearing entirely, recognizing the only way to win was not to play. Andrew Keegan, another staple of the Big Three, saw his star fade as the 90s closed. He drifted into independent films and later gained a different kind of notoriety for founding an unconventional spiritual movement. Others met more tragic or more public ends. The industry is littered with young men who are chewed up and spat out, their struggles with addiction, mental health, and identity crises becoming tabloid fodder. Edward Furlong, the raw, prodigious talent from Terminator 2, saw his promising career completely derailed by severe addiction and a string of legal issues. Brad Renfro, another astonishingly gifted actor from The Client, battled drug addiction for his entire career and died of an overdose at the tragically young age of 25. This was the curse Sawa was facing. It wasn't a supernatural hex. It was the logical, predictable, and destructive outcome of an industry that builds idols just to watch them fall. His controversy, as the original text noted, is that there is no major public controversy. His rebellion wasn't lashing out with public meltdowns, arrests, or scandalous interviews. His rebellion was internal, strategic, and professional. It was a calculated attempt to take control of his own image, to systematically dismantle the Casper persona before it suffocated him. He didn't just want to age out of the roles. He wanted to break out of the typecast. His strategy was to pivot hard into projects that were darker, grittier, and decidedly not family-friendly. He wasn't just trying to get new fans. He was actively trying to fire his old ones. His first major act of rebellion came in 1998 at the absolute zenith of his Tiger Beat fame. He sought out and landed a role in SLC Punk, a raw, independent film about the burgeoning punk rock scene in the deeply conservative landscape of Salt Lake City, Utah, in the 1980s. This was not a Hollywood movie. This was a Sundance film, a passion project from writer-director James Marandino. It was a world away from the polished, high-budget sets of Casper or Now and Then. The film itself was a vibrant, chaotic, and surprisingly philosophical exploration of anarchy, identity, and the seemingly inevitable slide into conformity. It centers on Steve-O, a career-defining performance by Matthew Lillard, and his best friend, Heroin Bob, Michael Gorgian, two blue-haired punks navigating their scene. The film is a cult classic precisely because it treats its subjects with both reverence and biting satire. It understands the passion, the rage, and the intellectual underpinning of the punk movement while also mercilessly mocking its self-important posturing and internal contradictions. Devon Sawa's role was Sean. He is not the lead, but his character is pivotal and devastating. Sean is introduced as a fellow punk, but one who comes from a nice, affluent suburban family. He's the kid who has it all, but embraces the punk aesthetic to escape his cookie-cutter life. In one of the film's most memorable and disturbing scenes, Sean attends a party, ingests a massive amount of acid, and suffers a complete, terrifying, psychotic break. We see him later, his brain fried, sitting passively in his parents' pristine home, reduced to a childlike, vegetable-like state. His rebellion doesn't lead to freedom, it leads to his utter destruction. This was a grenade, calculated and precise, thrown directly at his pin-up image. This was the anti-Casper. His screen time is spent discussing nihilism, ingesting drugs, and culminating in a horrifying, non-glamorous, and permanent downfall. He isn't the romantic fantasy, he's the cautionary tale. He doesn't get the girl, he loses his mind. For the millions of fans who had his poster on their wall, this film was incomprehensible. It wasn't marketed to them, it wasn't for them. SLC Punk was a critical darling at film festivals and became a massive cult hit on video, finding its audience of disaffected teens and college students. For Sawa, it was a declaration of intent. It was a signal fired not to BOP magazine, but to casting directors and producers. I am not who you think I am. I can do this. Having dipped his toe into the gritty world of indie film, Sawa immediately doubled down, this time from within the studio system itself. In 1999, he took his first top-billed role in a major studio film, Columbia Pictures' Idle Hands. This was his chance to prove he could lead a movie, to transition from co-star to movie star. And the vehicle he chose was a high-concept, gory stoner horror comedy. The timing was key. The late 90s horror comedy genre was booming. Scream, 1996, had resurrected the slasher film by making it self-aware, meta, and funny. Films like The Faculty, 1998, and Disturbing Behavior, 1998, were all aimed squarely at a teen audience that was smart, cynical, and wanted more than the straightforward scares of the 80s. Idle Hands was designed to be a part of this movement, but with a much heavier emphasis on comedy and stoner. As the original text's brief notes, Sawa actively sought out this kind of role. He was on a mission to shatter the squeaky clean Casper image, and what better way than to play a character whose entire motivation is to smoke marijuana. The film's premise is gloriously absurd. Sawa plays Anton Tobias, the laziest teenager in America. He is a slacker, in the purest sense, his life revolving around getting high, watching TV, and hanging out with his equally unambitious friends, played by Seth Green and Eldon Henson. His idyllic life is ruined when his right hand becomes possessed by a demonic force and goes on a killing spree, starting with his own parents. This was the anti-hero to end all anti-heroes. Anton is not a leader. He is not a role model. He is, as the film unsubtly makes clear, a massive pothead. The film's tagline was, "The ultimate Bud Dye movie." Sawa's performance is a brilliant piece of physical comedy. He spends half the film literally fighting his own hand, a battle that is equal parts bloody and slapstick, reminiscent of Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2. He's a final boy by default, a deeply flawed and non-heroic protagonist who just wants to stop his hand from murdering his crush, played by a pre-famed Jessica Alba, so he can hopefully go to the school dance. Idle Hands was the perfect, irreverent, bloody, and funny vehicle to bury the Casper ghost for good. It was the anti-romance. However, the film's release was struck by a real-world tragedy that no marketing plan could overcome. It was released on April 30th, 1999, just 10 days after the Columbine High School massacre. The nation was in mourning, and the absolute last thing audiences wanted to see was a bloody high school-centric comedy, no matter how good-natured. The film bombed hard at the box office, but like SLC Punk, its story didn't end there. It found a massive, appreciative audience on VHS and DVD, becoming a beloved cult classic of the era, a staple of sleepovers and video store rentals. For Sawa, while a box office disappointment, it was a massive image victory. He had proven he could lead a studio film. He had proven he had impeccable comedic timing, and he had proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was not the angelic boy on the staircase. He was a slacker stoner who chopped up his friends with a bowling ball. The pivot was working. After the subversive cult hits of SLC Punk and Idle Hands, the year 2000 brought the role that should have been his final definitive graduation. This was the one. This was Final Destination. The context was perfect. The teen horror boom was still at its absolute peak, but the scream formula of a masked killer stalking teens was wearing thin. The market was saturated. A new high-concept idea was needed. It came from writer Jeffrey Reddick, who had originally conceived the story as a spec script for The X-Files. New Line Cinema, the studio that built its reputation as the house that Freddy built, saw the potential and smartly retooled it for the teen market. The concept was and remains brilliant. The killer was not a person in a mask, but death itself, an invisible, implacable, and malevolent force. The story centered on a group of high school students who cheat death when one of them, Alex Browning, has a vivid premonition of their plane exploding on a class trip to Paris. He panics, gets himself and a handful of others kicked off the flight, and they watch in horror as the plane explodes exactly as he predicted. But death, it turns out, doesn't like to be cheated. It begins hunting down the survivors one by one in the order they were meant to die, using a series of elaborate Rube Goldberg-style accidents to reclaim them. Sawa was cast as the lead, Alex Browning. This role was everything Idle Hands was not. Alex was not a slacker. He was not a comic relief side character. He was the protagonist. He was the Cassandra, the tortured prophet who nobody believes. The film's entire premise rested on Sawa's shoulders. The audience had to believe him. If his performance failed, the entire concept of an invisible killer would collapse into absurdity. Sawa was brilliant in it. His portrayal of Alex Browning is a masterclass in controlled paranoia. He's not cool. He's not the charming hero. He's twitchy, intense, obsessive, and compellingly desperate. You watch as the weight of this terrible knowledge crushes him, as he frantically tries to decipher death's design, while being dismissed as crazy by everyone around him. Sawa's performance is raw, less polished than the slick protagonists of other slashers of the era, and all the more effective for it. He makes the unbelievable premise feel terrifyingly real. Final Destination was a massive, out-of-left-field, word-of-mouth blockbuster. On a modest $23 million budget, it grossed over $112 million worldwide. It spawned one of the most successful and durable horror franchises of the 21st century. For Devon Sawa, this was the moment of triumph. He had successfully led a blockbuster. He had proven he had the dramatic chops to carry a serious high-concept film. He was now officially a leading man. He wasn't just the final guy. He was the first guy, the star who opened a hit film. In that same golden year, 2000, Sawa achieved a different and perhaps more lasting form of pop culture immortality. At that moment, there was no bigger, more controversial, or more important musician on the planet than Eminem. His album, The Marshall Mathers LP, was a cultural atom bomb, a work of lyrical genius and shocking content that had parents, critics, and politicians in an uproar. The album's centerpiece was Stan, a dark narrative-driven epic, a collaboration with Dido that told the story of an obsessed, mentally unstable fan's descent into madness and violence. The legendary producer Dr. Dre was directing the music video, and he wanted it to be more than just a promotional clip. He wanted to create a cinematic short film. He had just seen Final Destination and was deeply impressed by the raw, paranoid intensity of Sawa's performance. Sawa was cast. This was not a quick winking celebrity cameo. This was a full-on lead actor performance in an 8-minute dialogue-driven film. Sawa played Stanley, or Stan. The resulting video was a cultural landmark, a permanent fixture on TRL and MTV, and is still studied in film and media classes today. Sawa's portrayal of the fan's descent is chilling and heartbreaking. We see him in his basement, obsessively writing to his idol. We see his appearance change, bleaching his hair to look more like Eminem. We see his growing, terrifying rage as his letters go unanswered. And finally, we see the climax, a drunken, screaming monologue in his car, his pregnant girlfriend, played by Dido, bound in the trunk as he drives off a bridge. Sawa held his own opposite the biggest cultural titan on earth, embodying the dark side of the very fame he himself was navigating. The video was a phenomenon. It gave the song its visual identity, cementing its narrative in the public's mind forever. It also gave Sawa a different kind of credibility. This was not teen idol fame. This was cool. This was a cosign from the most important figures in music. He wasn't just a movie star. He was a piece of music history. At the close of 2000, Devon Sawa had done the impossible. He had not only survived the teen idol curse, he had systematically defeated it. As the star of a blockbuster franchise in the face of a culture-defining music video, he was a 22-year-old leading man, poised for a long and serious career. He had successfully graduated. The next logical step was a string of bigger roles, more complex dramas, and a permanent place on the Hollywood A-list. The foundation was set, the launch pad was clear. But in a brutal demonstration of Hollywood's unforgiving nature, the rocket never took off. The very momentum that seemed unstoppable would be shattered, and the man who had just reached the summit would find himself in a freefall. At the dawn of 2001, Devon Sawa should have been untouchable. At 22 years old, he had achieved what Hollywood considers the hat trick of career transitions. He had successfully pivoted from teen idol to cult icon with SLC Punk and Idle Hands. He had graduated to a bankable leading man with the blockbuster Final Destination, and he had been anointed with cultural cool by starring in Eminem's Stan, arguably the most significant music video of the decade. He had escaped the gilded cage and was standing on the launch pad for a long, serious adult career. The scripts should have been piling up. The next big franchises, the serious dramas, the major action roles, all should have been his for the taking. And then, nothing. The momentum that seemed so powerful, so unstoppable, simply stopped. The vanishing act was not instantaneous, but it was swift and brutal. It came in the form of two back-to-back high-profile failures that acted as a 1-2 punch, knocking his career clean off its trajectory. The first blow was Slackers, 2002. On paper, it must have seemed like a smart follow-up to Idle Hands. It was another subversive, high-concept R-rated comedy, this time from Screen Gems. The plot centered on a group of college con artists who, after cheating their way through their final exams, are blackmailed by an unhinged, obsessive nerd named Cool Ethan, played with frantic energy by Jason Schwartzman. Sawa played Dave, the leader and main heartthrob of the cheating trio. The film was an attempt to capture the raunchy, clever energy of American Pie, but with a darker, more cynical edge. The result was a critical and commercial disaster. The film was reviled by critics. The New York Times called it aggressively unpleasant. Roger Ebert gave it a 0 stars rating, describing it as a wretched film, bankrupt of intelligence and wit. Audiences stayed away in droves. Where Idle Hands had been subversive and charming, Slackers was perceived as mean-spirited and chaotic. For Sawa, the role was a regression. He was back to playing the cute guy, but this time in a film that was universally panned. The second blow landed that same year, Extreme Ops, 2002. This was his test as a potential action star. A big-budget, high-octane thriller from Paramount Pictures, it was meant to be Top Gun on snowboards. Sawa starred as Will, the leader of a renegade film crew, alongside co-stars Rufus Sewell and Bridget Wilson Sampras, who, while shooting an extreme sports commercial in the Austrian Alps, accidentally filmed the secret compound of a Serbian war criminal. Again, the film was a catastrophe. It was a chaotic, nonsensical mess of over-the-top stunts and a threadbare plot. It was dumped into theaters in late November with little promotion and vanished without a trace, grossing a pathetic $13 million worldwide against a reported $40 million budget. It wasn't just a flop, it was a write-off. In the ruthless calculus of Hollywood, you are only as good as your last hit. Sawa had followed his 2 career-defining successes, Final Destination and Stan, with 2 career-killing bombs. In the span of 24 months, he had gone from the next big thing to box office poison. The scripts that had been piling up started to dry up. The phone that had been ringing off the hook went quiet. The fame, which had recently been a suffocating white-hot inferno, suddenly turned cold, leaving a vacuum in its wake. As Sawa himself has stated, he was profoundly burnt out. He was tired of the game, tired of the industry, and tired of the suffocating pressure to be Devon Sawa. He had spent 5 years desperately trying to escape one box, the teen idol, only to find himself trapped in another, the horror/comedy guy, that had just collapsed on top of him. In a move that was and still is almost unthinkable for a star of his magnitude, he just left. Around 2003 or 2004, at the age of 25, he retreated from Hollywood. He didn't just move to an apartment in Silver Lake to focus on his craft or take a short break. He went home. He returned to Vancouver, British Columbia, disappearing from the public eye almost as completely as his SLC Punk character had. This began what he refers to as his wilderness years. From roughly 2004 to 2009, Devon Sawa was adrift. This was not a glamorous Hollywood party phase, not the hedonistic excess of the it boy depicted in tabloids. This was the dark, quiet, and deeply personal reality of an identity crisis. This was the curse manifesting not as a public spectacle, but as a private internal battle. As the original text's brief poignantly notes, he drank a lot during this period. Imagine the psychological whiplash. At 17, you are the romantic ideal for millions. Your entrance in a film met with a tidal wave of adoration. At 22, you are the face of a blockbuster franchise and a culture-defining music video. You are the center of the universe. Then at 27, you find yourself back in your home country with no clear path forward. Your entire identity is tied to a past you can't reclaim and a future you can't no longer see. The industry that built you has discarded you. The fans who adored you have moved on to the next face. Who are you when no one is watching? He didn't stop working entirely, but the projects he took were a world away from the A-list. He became a jobbing actor, a term for a professional who works consistently but without the glamour or recognition of stardom. He was grinding it out in the indie world, a ghost of the superstar he had been. He starred in a string of independent, often direct-to-video films that most of his original fans never even knew existed. Titles like Extreme Dating, 2004, Shooting Gallery, 2005, alongside Ving Rhames, and the horror film Devil's Den, 2006. He even did voice work, playing Flash Thompson in the short-lived Spider-Man, the new animated series, in 2003. These were not passion projects. This was work. This was the reality of an actor who had fallen off the main roster just trying to keep a foot in the door, just trying to pay the bills. He was, in effect, in exile. He was lost, grappling with the bottle and the existential dread of his own irrelevance. And then, back in that familiar non-Hollywood world of Vancouver, he met someone, a Canadian film producer named Donnie Sahanovich. Meeting Donnie was not a lightning bolt movie magic moment. It was something more real and more important. It was the catalyst for his second and more profound transformation. In Donnie, he found a partner who was not connected to his past fame, who was not a part of the Hollywood machine, but who was a part of the industry in a grounded, professional Canadian way. He found a new purpose, a reason to build a life rather than just mourn a career. He got sober. The party ended. The wilderness years of drifting and drinking came to a close, and the hard, unglamorous work of rebuilding began. He was approaching his 30s, an age that is a death knell for many actors who start as young as he did. He was at a crossroads, fade away completely into a "where are they now" segment, or fight his way back from the very bottom. What happened to Devon Sawa is the rule, not the exception. The curse of the teen heartthrob is real, but his story is the rare exception to its fatal conclusion. His rebellion, his attempt to break the typecast with SLC Punk and idle hands, hadn't fully worked. The industry cast him aside anyway. His curse wasn't the public self-destruction of a Brad Renfro or an Edward Furlong. His battle wasn't with the paparazzi. It was with himself, with the bottle, alone in Canada. His survival is what makes him an outlier. He didn't self-destruct in public. He retreated, dealt with his demons in private, and found an anchor in a real adult life. He got married to Donnie on May 20th, 2013. They had their first child, a son named Hudson, in 2014, followed by a daughter, Scarlett Helena, in 2016. He found something more important than fame: normalcy. He also defines himself as an atheist and a strong supporter of religious freedom. This small biographical detail noted in the original brief speaks volumes about his character. He is a man who, from a young age, was questioning the narratives handed to him, whether it was the religion of his upbringing or the Hollywood religion of fame. He chose his own path. The wilderness years were a crucible. Devon Sawa entered them as a burnt-out former superstar, a ghost of his own fame, and he emerged as something else entirely, an adult. He was a husband, a father, and a man who had faced down his own demons in private, far from the glare of the Hollywood machine that had created and discarded him. He was sober, grounded by a normalcy he had never known during his peak, and he was finally ready to rebuild his career. But this time, it would be on his terms. It would not be a comeback in the traditional sense, no splashy, desperate attempt to reclaim his former glory. It would be a rebuilding brick by brick from the ground up. This was the beginning of the Sawa-ssance. The first and most crucial brick was laid in 2010. He didn't burst back onto the scene in a blockbuster film. He did it the way so many actors rebuild and redefine themselves, with steady, consistent, impressive work on television. He was cast in the CW's action spy series Nikita, a reboot of the 1990s La Femme Nikita. The show, starring Maggie Q as the titular assassin, was a slick, high-octane, and surprisingly character-driven series. Sawa was cast as Owen Elliott. This was not a one-off guest spot. It was a major recurring role that would span 3 seasons. The role was a revelation, a deliberate and shocking contrast to every image the public held of him. Owen Elliott was a cleaner, a former government assassin, and a fellow fugitive from the shadowy Division. This wasn't the boy from Casper. This wasn't the slacker from Idle Hands. This was a man. He was physically imposing, his frame built out with muscle. He was rugged, conflicted, and haunted. His performance was defined by a quiet, dangerous intensity. He was a mature, compelling, and physically capable adult actor. The role was transformative. For an entire generation of CW viewers who had no memory of Tiger Beat, this was their first introduction to Devon Sawa. He wasn't a former teen idol. He was the badass from Nikita. And for those who did remember him, the role was a powerful recalibration. It systematically erased the last remnants of his floppy-haired image. It proved to casting directors, producers, and most importantly, audiences that he was back, he was sober, he was serious, and he had range. He wasn't a nostalgic gimmick, he was an actor ready for the next phase. From the foundation of Nikita, he began to meticulously build a new reputation. He worked constantly, taking on roles in a variety of television shows and independent films. He was no longer a star chasing the spotlight. He was a character actor chasing the work. He appeared in films like The Philly Kid, 2012, and A Resurrection, 2013. And he found his true home, his new niche, in the very genre that had given him his last great hit 2 decades prior, horror and thrillers. This genre, often dismissed by serious critics, is in fact one of the most creatively fertile grounds for actors. It demands full-body commitment, emotional extremes, and an ability to ground the fantastic in believable human reality. Sawa thrived in it. He even returned to his roots, starring in the 2016 sequel to his first rebellious film, Punk's Dead, SLC Punk 2, reprising his role as Sean, this time in a dream sequence, a meta-nod to the character and the film that started his pivot. But his true breakthrough, the film that announced his arrival as a craftsman of the highest order, came in 2020. It was a small, independent survival thriller called Hunter, Hunter. Hunter, Hunter is a brutal, bleak, and relentlessly tense film. Sawa played Joseph Merceau, a rugged fur trapper living a near-Neolithic existence in the remote Canadian wilderness with his wife, Anne Camille Sullivan, and daughter, Renee. They are off the grid, their livelihood threatened by the arrival of a rogue, hyper-intelligent wolf that is devouring their traps. Joseph, a man of few words and profound capability, becomes obsessed with hunting this wolf, believing it to be the source of all their problems. He leaves his family to track it, setting in motion a chain of events that leads to one of the most shocking and truly horrific final acts in modern horror. His performance was a gut punch. He was almost unrecognizable. Bearded, gaunt, his eyes conveying a desperate, silent intensity, Sawa embodied the image of a man slowly being ground down by nature, poverty, and his own single-minded obsession. It was a performance of almost pure physicality and stoicism. He was the provider, the protector, the hunter, a raw, elemental force. The film received rave reviews from genre critics, with many singling out Sawa's powerful, transformative, and tragically human performance. This was not a comeback. This was an arrival. This was the work of a seasoned, dedicated actor at the peak of his craft. He immediately followed it up with 2021's Black Friday, a fun, gory horror comedy set in a toy store on the busiest shopping day of the year, co-starring the legendary Bruce Campbell. Crucially, Sawa was also an executive producer on the film. He wasn't just taking jobs anymore, he was shaping his own projects. He was finally in control. And then Don Mancini came calling. Don Mancini is horror royalty. He is the creator of the Child's Play franchise, the father of Chucky, the iconic killer doll. Mancini, a brilliant writer and director, had successfully navigated his creation from 80s slasher to 90s meta-comedy, Bride of Chucky, and back to genuine horror. He was now creating Chucky, a television series for Sci-Fi and USA Network that would continue the labyrinthine, decade-spanning story. The show was a love letter to the entire franchise, a Chucky-verse that was smart, gory, hilarious, and surprisingly progressive. Mancini, a fan of Sawa's work, cast him in Season 1. Sawa was given a juicy, complex dual role. He played identical twin brothers Logan and Lucas Wheeler. Logan was the well-meaning but flawed father of the show's teenage protagonist, Jake Wheeler. Lucas was Jake's abusive, alcoholic uncle. It was a showcase for Sawa's range, allowing him to play both sympathy and menace. And, in grand Chucky tradition, spoiler, both brothers were brutally killed off by the end of the season. But Mancini and the audience loved Sawa so much that the death didn't stick. In a move that would become a beloved running gag, Mancini invited him back for Season 2, this time as an entirely different character. Sawa played Father Bryce, a stern, determined, and authoritative priest sent to the Catholic Reform School, where the surviving teens had been relocated to exorcise the doll. It was a complete transformation, a righteous, holy man with a dark secret. And, in what became a season highlight, Father Bryce was also dispatched in a spectacularly gory fashion, literally exploding after a failed exorcism. By Season 3, the gag had become a central, metatextual part of the show's appeal. Sawa returned again, this time as a new main character, James Collins, the President of the United States who has moved into the White House with his family. A White House that is now being stalked by Chucky. He also briefly played the President's body double, Randall Jenkins. The series, a massive critical and commercial success, has become a showcase for Sawa's incredible versatility. In a single franchise, he has gotten to play comedy, drama, domestic pathos, and balls-to-the-wall horror, all while winking at the audience. This is the genius of his resurrection. He hasn't just returned to the spotlight. He has become the muse of a beloved, smart, and subversive horror franchise. There's a profound meta-commentary at play. The man who starred in Final Destination, the ultimate final guy who cheats death, has now become the ultimate recurring victim, the guy who always dies. It's a full-circle journey, a statement on his own career. He is a man who keeps dying and coming back, stronger, more interesting, and more beloved every single time. His upcoming slate is packed. His work includes the 2023 hit TV adaptation of Twisted Metal, and he is set to star in the new series Murder in a Small Town. He has multiple films in post-production, like the horror film Hard Eyes and the revival return of The Living Dead. He is working more and at a higher level of quality than ever before in his life. He has also stepped behind the camera, co-producing several of his films and directing a short Mama Loves Shortnin' 2016. He is no longer just the face on the poster. He is a filmmaker. The story of Devon Sawa is remarkable not for its explosive tabloid-ready drama, but for its quiet, grinding perseverance. He is the rare, profound exception to the curse of the teen heartthrob. He didn't flame out. He didn't fade away into a nostalgic punchline. He retreated, he rebuilt, and he returned entirely on his own terms. His legacy is now twofold, existing on two separate parallel tracks. First, there is the 90s icon. That version of Devon Sawa is immortal, a permanent fixture in the pop culture memory of a generation. He is the angelic ghost on the staircase in Casper. He is the stoner hero of Idle Hands. He is the terrified, paranoid face of Final Destination. And he is the tragic, rain-soaked fan in Stan. That legacy is secure, frozen in amber, a perfect snapshot of a bygone era. But the second and far more significant legacy is that of the man who survived that icon. His escape from the curse in a masterclass in longevity and a testament to his character. He did it by being smart enough to recognize the danger of the typecast early on. He did it by being brave enough to walk away from the entire machine when it became toxic and suffocating. And most importantly, he did it by being humble enough to start over from the absolute bottom, to relearn his craft, and to earn his new reputation through sheer, unglamorous work. He survived because he had a foundation to return to, a normal life, a family, a home in Canada, far away from the distortions of the Hollywood machine. And he thrived because he built a new foundation, his wife Donnie and his two children. He found something more real and more durable than fame, a life. Today he engages with his 90s past with a wonderful, knowing sense of humor and genuine warmth. He interacts with fans on social media, happily joking about "Can I Keep You?" or his rivalry with JTT. He isn't haunted by that ghost, he's at peace with it. He understands that it's a part of his story, but it no longer defines him. He won a Saturn Award in 2001 for Best Performance by a younger actor for Final Destination, a recognition of his talent at the peak of his first wave. But his current gritty and transformative work in Hunter x Hunter and his wildly entertaining multi-character tour de force in Chucky show a depth, a craft, and a joyful confidence that was only hinted at 2 decades ago. He has successfully and definitively transformed himself from a heartthrob to a craftsman. Devon Sawa's story is a profound lesson in identity. He was a boy who became a product. He was a product that became a burnout. And he was a burnout that became a man. He proved that the ultimate final destination isn't what fate or a studio or a teen magazine hands you. It's the life you build for yourself, brick by brick, long after the cameras have stopped flashing and the screaming has stopped. He didn't just survive the 90s, he survived himself. And in doing so, he finally truly became his own. Truly